I still remember the day he called me too quiet. It wasn't the words themselves that stung, it was how he said them, like silence was a flaw, like restraint was weakness. That was the day I realized how loud some people can be, even when they're wrong. I'm Elena Ward, corporate analyst, 32 years old, average in the eyes of most people, except for the ones who actually pay attention. I work for a firm called Redden and Myers Consulting, a glassbox company full of polished smiles and private agendas. Every hallway gleams, every email ends with best regards, and every coffee break is a competition disguised as small talk. And me, the one who sits quietly in the corner of meetings, taking notes no one reads, but remembering everything. Our department head Marcus Hale was the kind of man who owned every room he walked into, charming, sharp suit, perfect hair. He had this way of speaking like every sentence was already a headline. People adored him, clients trusted him, upper management saw him as a rising star. But there's something about people like Marcus. When everyone else is blinded by their shine, they forget to notice the shadows they cast. That morning, during our quarterly review meeting, he leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "Elena's sharp, but she's too quiet. Not leadership material, just background support." Laughter rippled around the table, polite, nervous laughter, the kind people use when they're unsure if something's funny or just cruel. I smiled politely like I always do, but inside something shifted. A quiet flame, small but steady, began to burn. After the meeting, I went back to my cubicle, the one tucked near the printer between HR and the server closet. That spot no one else wanted turned out to be perfect for me, because in that quiet little corner I saw everything, heard everything. And over the next few weeks, I started noticing something off. It began with numbers. They always tell the truth, even when people don't. One of our accounts, Lincrest Logistics, had expense reports that didn't add up, invoices duplicated, travel claims filed twice. It wasn't huge at first, just a few thousand here, a few thousand there, but the patterns were deliberate. I flagged it quietly in a report, sent it to Marcus. He replied an hour later with one line. "Leave it, that's above your clearance." Above my clearance. That phrase stuck to me like static. Now I could have left it there, most people would have, but silence doesn't mean indifference. And if Marcus thought being too quiet meant being blind, he was about to find out otherwise. 2 weeks later, he held a team dinner downtown, a flashy rooftop event to celebrate quarterly growth. Everyone showed up in their best outfits, pretending we weren't all quietly competing for his approval. He gave his usual speech, all charisma, all performance, but as he lifted his glass, his phone buzzed. He checked it, smiled, and turned away to take a call. That's when I noticed the envelope sticking out of his briefcase, Redden and Myers letterhead, confidential. It was addressed to him, but copied to a company I'd never heard of, Hallstrom Data Partners. My gut tightened. Something was wrong. Over the next few days, I began connecting dots no one else seemed to see. Hallstrom Data Partners was a consulting subcontractor. Our firm had recently added to handle Overflow Analytics. But when I looked up their address, it led to an empty suite in a shared office building. No website, no employees listed, just a PO box and a shell registration. It didn't take long for me to realize what Marcus had done. He'd created a fake subcontractor, funneling company funds into it, into himself. The quiet ones always notice what the loud ones think they can hide. I started collecting everything, emails, approval signatures, audit trails buried in metadata, even calendar invites that showed him meeting with Hallstrom's non-existent staff. But I didn't say a word, not yet. Because if I'd learned anything from watching Marcus, it was timing. In this company, exposure wasn't just about evidence, it was about strategy. And I wanted to make sure that when the truth came out, it wouldn't just bruise him, it would bury him. But secrets have a way of sensing when they're being watched, and Marcus, always too confident, started to notice my silence wasn't submission anymore. He'd walk by my desk slow, calculated, drop little comments like, "You working late again, Elena? Careful, don't burn out over details. You seem distracted, everything okay?" His smile never reached his eyes, and mine never revealed what I knew. Then one morning my system access changed. Files I'd used daily were suddenly restricted. I couldn't view certain folders, couldn't run the financial crosscheck macros I'd built. When I asked it, they said Marcus had restructured team permissions. That was his first move, try to corner me quietly. But what he didn't know was that I'd already made secure offline copies, multiple backups, and one very detailed report that I'd been preparing, just in case. That night, sitting alone in my apartment with nothing but my laptop glow, I read through every file, every transaction, every signature. And then I found it, an approval chain that linked directly to one of our biggest clients, Westlake Holdings. Marcus had been inflating consulting hours, billing them triple while reporting normal costs internally. That was embezzlement, a lot of it. My hands trembled, not out of fear, but out of something colder. Resolve. I wasn't just protecting my job anymore. I was protecting the truth. And maybe, in a strange way, I was protecting every quiet person who'd ever been dismissed, talked over, or underestimated by people like him. Because silence isn't weakness, it's potential energy, waiting for the right moment to be released. The next morning, Marcus called a private check-in meeting, just the two of us. His office was all glass, modern, transparent, but the way he closed the blinds said otherwise. "Elena," he started, voice smooth, "you've been doing some digging." I didn't answer. He leaned forward. "That's not your role. You're here to support, not to supervise." Support, not supervise. He made it sound like obedience. I met his eyes. If something looks wrong, I have a duty to report it. He chuckled. "Report it to who, me?" That's when I realized he wasn't worried. He was confident that no one would believe me. After all, I was just the quiet one. He ended the meeting with a warning masked as concern. "Be careful, Elena. Ambition's good, but crossing boundaries is." I walked out smiling, not because I wasn't scared, but because I knew he'd just confirmed everything I needed to hear. That night I stayed in the office long after everyone left. Security guards passed by, nodding. The hum of the HVAC filled the silence. I finished compiling the full report, every fraudulent document, every signature, every red flag. Then I encrypted it. And sent it not to HR, not to Marcus, but directly to the board's internal audit division. My hands shook when I hit send. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I wasn't the quiet one anymore. By the next morning, whispers had started. Someone from internal audit was visiting. Marcus's calendar showed a sudden executive review meeting. He smiled at everyone as usual, but his eyes were different, restless, flickering. When he saw me, his jaw tightened. "Morning, Elena." "Morning," I said softly, and walked past him just as the auditors stepped off the elevator. The day stretched long, heavy with silence. No one said much, but everyone felt it. Something was unraveling. By 4 p.m., Marcus's office blinds were still closed. The sound of voices, low, tense, official, leaked through the glass. At 5:12 p.m. he walked out, face pale, tie loosened. He didn't look at anyone, he just left. And when the elevator doors closed behind him, the office finally exhaled. But I knew this wasn't over. He'd built too much power, too many allies to go down quietly. And I hadn't told anyone yet that I still had evidence he hadn't realized existed, the kind that could expose who helped him. Because Marcus wasn't working alone, and the deeper I dug, the clearer it became, this company had more than one liar hiding behind glass. They say the truth sets you free, but no one tells you how heavy freedom can feel when it arrives too soon. The morning after Marcus walked out, the entire floor felt different. The usual chatter had vanished. People spoke in careful tones, eyes darting toward the empty office that used to be his. His nameplate was still on the door, but the blinds were open now, like a wound exposed to daylight. I kept my head down, logged in and worked like nothing had changed, but everything had. My inbox was a storm. Messages from colleagues, HR notices, finance updates, meeting reschedules. In the middle of it all sat one email that made my pulse race. Subject: confidential internal audit request from Board Compliance Division. They wanted to meet today. The meeting was in a small conference room on the 17th floor, not the kind of place analysts like me usually get invited to. When I walked in, two people were waiting. A woman in her 40s with a calm, unreadable face, Director Lena Moss, head of compliance, and a younger man in a navy suit who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Ms. Ward," Moss said, standing to shake my hand, "we've reviewed your report." Her tone was neutral, careful, like she wasn't sure whether to thank me or question me. The next hour was a blur of questions, dates, figures, file names, transaction codes. Every line of data I'd pulled, every inconsistency I'd logged, they knew it all. Then Moss leaned forward and said quietly, "You understand what you've done here, correct? This isn't just a financial discrepancy, it's criminal exposure." My throat tightened. "You mean?" "If what you've documented holds up," she said, "it could open a full investigation, both internal and federal." Federal, that word echoed in my chest like thunder. After the meeting, I went back to my desk. Everyone was pretending to work, but the tension was palpable. Whispers followed me. "She's the one who reported him. No way, Elena, guess being quiet pays off." I didn't confirm or deny anything, I just kept working. Because even though Marcus was gone, I could feel it. His shadow hadn't left the building. That afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. "Unknown, you should have kept quiet." My stomach turned. No name, no signature, just those 4 words. I locked my phone, took a breath and deleted it, but my hands were trembling again. Was it him or someone else he dragged down with him? By Friday, the whispers became chaos. An official memo went out from the CEO's office. Effective immediately, Marcus Hale is on administrative leave pending review of compliance irregularities. The office erupted. Some people were shocked, some pretended to be, and some looked angry. That last group bothered me. They weren't angry for Marcus, they were angry about what this meant for them. That night as I packed up to leave, a coworker approached me, Rachel, one of Marcus's senior project leads. She'd always been friendly in that corporate ally kind of way, but now her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Rough week, huh?" she said. "You could say that. Word is you've been helping the auditors, brave." The way she said brave sounded like an accusation. "Just doing my job," I replied. She leaned in. "Careful, Elena. Around here the truth has a short shelf life." Then she walked away. Over the weekend I couldn't sleep. Every sound from the hallway made me flinch. Every vibration from my phone made my chest tighten. Sunday night I opened my laptop. If Marcus had allies, I needed to know who. I dug deeper into archived files, project audits, subcontractor lists, consultant invoices. The same name appeared again and again, Hallstrom Data Partners, and next to it authorizations from 3 other managers, including Rachel. By Monday morning the board's auditors were everywhere, on every floor behind closed doors checking records. Rachel looked tense but composed. She didn't speak to me all day. Then around noon I got another message, different number this time. "Unknown, you're making enemies you don't understand." I should have been scared, but I was not anymore. Because by then, I'd already copied Rachel's approval logs and matched them to Hallstrom's fake invoices. If Marcus was the architect, Rachel and her partners were the builders. And I was about to bring the whole structure down. That evening I was called to another meeting, this time with Director Moss and a man I hadn't seen before. He introduced himself as Ethan Grave, legal counsel for the company. He had a sharp gaze, the kind that cuts through rehearsed answers. "Elena," he said, "your findings have been pivotal, but before we proceed I need to ask, are you aware of anyone else involved?" I hesitated, because naming names meant crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "But truth is truth." I nodded, then I slid a flash drive across the table. "You'll want to start with Rachel Park and her last 3 project budgets." Ethan's expression didn't change, but Moss glanced at him sharply. They understood. The rot went deeper than they thought. By the next day, Rachel's desk was empty, and 2 more managers resigned voluntarily. The company called it a compliance cleanup, the staff called it the purge. And me, I just kept working, quietly, precisely, because there was still something I didn't understand, how Marcus had managed to keep it hidden for so long. Late one night, as I was reviewing old emails, I noticed something subtle. Each Hallstrom invoice had a timestamp sent exactly 1 minute after a system backup. That meant someone had scheduled it, automated it. Not Marcus, not Rachel, someone higher up. Someone who controlled system privileges. My heart skipped a beat. There was only one department that could do that, corporate IT. And the director of it was the CEO's brother. That realization hit like ice water. This wasn't just fraud, it was systemic. If Marcus fell, maybe he was never meant to fall alone. Maybe he was the distraction, the loud one they could afford to lose. And I was the quiet one they never saw coming. The next morning, a board assistant dropped an envelope on my desk. Inside was a formal letter. Effective immediately, you are being promoted to Senior Analyst, Audit Integration Team. My promotion, a silent acknowledgement, a reward for what I'd done. People congratulated me, smiled, patted my shoulder, but behind their smiles I could see it, fear. Because they all knew now, quiet doesn't mean harmless. That evening as I left the office, I passed the CEO in the hallway. He paused, gave me a polite smile. Ms. Ward, you've had quite a week. Yes, sir. Good work on the compliance project. He said it smoothly, too smoothly, like someone rehearsed for crisis control. Then, as he walked away, I heard him say quietly into his phone, "Yes, contain it. Make sure it doesn't reach external auditors." My chest went cold. Contain it. He didn't want justice, he wanted damage control. I stood there in the empty hallway, the city lights reflecting off the glass, and for the first time since this all began, I felt something sharper than fear, clarity. Marcus had been a problem, but the real danger was the system that protected him. And if the system wanted containment, I was about to give it something it couldn't contain. They called it a promotion, but I knew what it really was. A leash, a polite way of saying, "We see you, Alina, don't go any further." My new title, Senior Analyst Audit Integration, came with a bigger office and a better view, but it also came with silence, meetings I was no longer invited to, emails that stopped arriving, and eyes that followed me every time I walked down the hallway. The company wanted to make me visible, so they could keep me under watch. For a while I played along, smiled when I had to, nodded through board briefings, pretended not to notice how every report I submitted now took longer than usual to be approved. But behind the scenes I was still collecting, because the truth doesn't disappear, it just gets buried under the noise. And I had learned to listen through noise better than anyone. A month passed, Marcus's case remained under review. Rachel and the others had signed NDAs in exchange for quiet exits. The CEO gave interviews about strengthening internal ethics. It was a show, a perfectly choreographed act. But the cracks were showing, clients started asking questions, stockholders started murmuring, and in those murmurs I heard opportunity. One night I received an anonymous email, no sender name, just a file attached labeled for Alina. For a second I hesitated, then I opened it. Inside was a scan of a confidential internal memo dated 3 months ago. It was from the CEO's office, addressed to Marcus Hale. Ray Hallstrom Data Partners continue routing through secondary channels, do not discuss externally. There it was, proof that the CEO had authorized the fake subcontractor. My breath caught, this wasn't just corruption, it was conspiracy. Someone had sent me this for a reason, but who? The next morning I found out. A sticky note appeared on my keyboard, small handwritten, no name. Meet me in the 22nd floor break room, 12:15, J. I scanned the office, pretending not to react. At 12:15 sharp I walked into the break room, the blinds were half closed, and standing by the window was James Patel, one of the senior compliance auditors. He was young but sharp, always quiet, always watching. "You got it?" he asked. I nodded. "You sent it." He exhaled. "Yeah, you're not the only one who's been digging, but you need to be careful, they're watching your network activity." The CEO, the whole upper tier, they're running cover. Marcus wasn't a mistake, he was a shield. He took the heat while they scrubbed the rest. My heart sank, so they're burying it. James looked at me, eyes steady. "Unless someone takes it public." Public, the word hung in the air like a loaded trigger. For days after that I couldn't think straight. Every time I walked through those glass halls, I felt the weight of eyes, the buzz of whispers. Taking it public meant blowing everything open, media, legal, maybe even government scrutiny. It also meant losing my job, my career, my safety. But staying silent meant watching them walk free, and I wasn't built for silence anymore. The turning point came 2 weeks later. I got a call from HR, polite voice, fake warmth. "Hi Elena, could you come in for a quick review meeting? Just a standard check-in." I knew that tone. It wasn't a check-in, it was a warning. When I arrived, 3 people were waiting, HR, legal, and a representative from it. They told me there had been unusual data access patterns from my account. "We just want to make sure you're not overstepping your clearance again," said the HR rep, smiling like she was offering me tea instead of a threat. I kept my voice steady. "All my work has been logged. I have full authorization under my new role." The IT rep looked annoyed. "We'll see about that." I smiled. "You should." They didn't realize I'd already anticipated this weeks ago. My reports were encrypted under external verification, time-stamped, immutable. Even if they deleted my access, the truth was already out there, safe. Waiting. That night I got another message from James. "They're closing in. If you're going to do it soon." And beneath it, a single link, a secure Dropbox portal used by the Herald Ledger, one of the country's biggest investigative news outlets. I stared at the link for hours, hands trembling, heart pounding. This was it, the line between survival and exposure. And I already knew which side I stood on. The next morning I walked into work like nothing had changed, smiled at the receptionist, nodded at my team, but my stomach was tight. At exactly 10:23 a.m. I hit send. The entire dataset, emails, memos, invoices, Marcus's records, the CEO's authorizations, uploaded to the journalist's secure inbox. When the confirmation flashed across my screen, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. Quiet, steady peace. It lasted 6 hours. At 4:30 p.m., security showed up at my desk. "Ms. Ward, please come with us." Dozens of heads turned as I stood. They escorted me to the executive floor, 3 guards, no explanation. In the boardroom sat the CEO, legal counsel Ethan Grave, and Director Moss. The CEO spoke first. "Elena, we have reason to believe you've shared confidential company data externally." My pulse thundered, but my face stayed calm. "I shared evidence of corporate fraud. That's not betrayal, that's accountability." He leaned forward, voice low. "You've made a serious mistake." "No," I said softly. "I corrected one." For a long moment no one spoke. Then Moss, her eyes flickering with something like respect, cleared her throat. "Mr. Caldwell, we should proceed carefully. If what she's saying is true, any disciplinary action could be seen as retaliation." The CEO's jaw clenched. "She's breached protocol." "She's upheld integrity," Moss countered. The room went silent. It was the first time I'd ever seen someone talk back to him. They suspended me pending investigation, escorted me out of the building, took my badge, my laptop, my access. But as I walked past the glass walls, I didn't feel small, I felt seen. Because I knew something they didn't, the story was already live. That night my phone blew up, news alerts, messages, calls. Headlines. Insider leaks reveal multi-million-dollar fraud at Redden and Myers Consulting. Subheadline: CEO linked to fake subcontractor scheme, whistleblower sparks investigation. My name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew. Every person who'd laughed at me in that meeting months ago, every coworker who'd whispered behind my back, every executive who thought I was invisible. They all knew. For the next 2 days I stayed home, curtains drawn, phone off except for James. He called once, his voice low and cautious. It worked, the board in chaos, the feds are in, Caldwell's gone into hiding. I didn't say much, just breathed. He hesitated, then added, "You did it, Elena, you brought them down." But it didn't feel like victory, not yet, because deep down I knew something was missing. Marcus. Where was he? He hadn't appeared in the news, no statements, no leaks, no trace. It was like he'd vanished the moment I pulled the trigger. Until one evening, a message came from an unknown number again. This time it was a photo, Marcus, standing on a yacht, drink in hand, somewhere tropical. And the message: "You may have burned the tower, Elena, but you forgot who built the foundation." My blood ran cold. He'd escaped. While the company burned, he'd slipped away, with money, connections, and enough deniability to start over. I stared at the photo for a long time, then slowly I smiled. Because if he thought I'd stop at exposure, he still didn't understand what quiet people are capable of. I didn't sleep the night before the board meeting, not because I was scared, but because I'd waited too long for this moment. For months I'd been the quiet one, the one who observed too much, who didn't speak up, who didn't have the charisma for leadership. Now my report, the one they told me to drop, had become the fire that wouldn't stop spreading. When I walked into the building that morning, the atmosphere was different. The usual hum of chatter, the clinking of coffee mugs, the fake small talk gone. Instead it was whispers, tight-lipped glances, the kind that travel faster than company memos. Someone had leaked part of my report, the audit trails, the fraudulent vendor payments, the missing signatures, all tied to him. Liam Grayson. My manager, my tormentor, the man who told me I'd never move up if I stayed so quiet. When I reached my floor, I saw him. Standing by his office door, tie loose, jaw clenched, he looked up at me, and for the first time there wasn't arrogance in his eyes, there was fear. "Elena," he said, voice low, "we need to talk." I didn't stop walking, not toward him, not toward my desk, straight to the conference room. "Now's not the time, Liam," I said without turning back. "The board's waiting." Inside the room, 12 executives sat in silence. The air felt heavy. My report, neatly bound, every page tagged, every number verified, sat in the center of the table like a bomb waiting to go off. The chair of the board, Mrs. Henderson, adjusted her glasses and looked at me. "Ms. Ward," she said, "your findings have caused quite a stir. Please summarize them for us." My palms were cold, but my voice was steady. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "The report traces financial discrepancies over the last 18 months, originating from managerial sign-offs in the operations department, specifically from Mr. Liam Grayson." You could hear the air leave the room, a sharp breath from one side, a shuffle of papers from another. Liam walked in right then, late, eyes burning into me. He sat opposite me, and for a long time no one spoke. Then, in that arrogant tone I'd known too well, he said, "This is a misunderstanding. She's been out to get me since the day I gave her a poor performance review." Mrs. Henderson looked at him calmly. "And yet," she said, turning to me, "Ms. Ward's data matches the external audit, down to the dollar." The silence that followed, it wasn't confusion anymore. It was realization, and it was beautiful. He tried to talk his way out. He always did. Blamed suppliers, blamed system errors, even hinted that I might have fabricated the numbers. I let him dig his own hole. Then, when he paused for air, I slid a flash drive across the table. "These are the security logs," I said quietly. "Your credentials were used to approve the payments. I also recovered deleted messages from your work chat, where you instructed the vendor to reroute funds." Liam's face drained of color. The chair turned to IT security. "Can we verify that?" The man nodded. "Already did, she's right." And just like that, the quiet one had spoken and the storm began. What happened next felt like slow motion. The board moved to suspend him pending investigation. He shouted, actually shouted, that it was all political, that I wanted his job. Security came in quietly. 2 guards, calm, efficient, final. He looked at me one last time as they walked him out. "You think this makes you better than me, Elena?" he hissed. I met his eyes, steady, unflinching. "No," I said, "it just makes me free." When the door shut behind him, no one spoke for a while. Then Mrs. Henderson turned to me and said, "You realize what you've done, Ms. Ward. You didn't just save this department, you saved this company." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, heart pounding. The next week was chaos, HR investigations, news articles, internal emails about integrity and transparency. People who'd barely spoken to me before suddenly wanted to thank me. The same colleagues who once called me too quiet now called me brave. It felt strange, like stepping out of the shadows and realizing how long you'd been standing in the dark. Then came the meeting that changed everything. Mrs. Henderson called me in. "Elena," she said, smiling softly, "the board has made a decision. We're restructuring operations. We need someone to rebuild it from the ground up, someone who's proven her judgment, her ethics, and her strength." I blinked. "You're offering me?" "Manager," she said, "effective immediately." For a second I couldn't speak. The title that once felt like a wall I could never climb, now it was mine, not because I was loud, not because I played politics, but because I told the truth when it mattered most. A week later I stood in the same office Liam once occupied, the same desk, the same window view, but it felt different now, cleaner, lighter, honest. I placed a small photo frame on the shelf, a quiet sunrise over the city skyline, under it a single note to myself. "Stay quiet but never silent." When I walked through the office that day, I noticed people watching again, but not with judgment, with respect, with something close to admiration. And I realized, it wasn't that I'd been too quiet all these years, it was that I'd been listening long enough to know when to finally speak. That afternoon an email hit my inbox, subject line, "Final audit outcome confidential." I opened it. Liam was officially terminated, charges filed, his name would be on no corporate board ever again. I read the message twice, then closed it and smiled. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it whispered through reports, through truth, through quiet people who refused to stay invisible. As the sun set beyond the glass walls, I leaned back in my chair. The city glowed, alive, electric, endless, and for the first time in years I didn't feel like a ghost in it. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. I was the one who listened, endured, and finally spoke. And when I did, the whole room heard me.